Sounds good. I guess we are up on item number 2, which is approval of the minutes. Sounds like, Alex, we cannot take a vote for the CTAC, but maybe I can entertain a motion for approval of the minutes for SANTEC, and then maybe we can go down the line.
My suggestion, Chair, is just to hold off on the minutes, and then we could approve them at the next meeting.
Both minutes? Is that what you're recommending?
Yes.
Okay, that sounds good. So then we're up on item number 3. Minji.
Okay, item number 3, public comments. I understand we have Eric Rohr on the line for an update on SB 743. Eric?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Eric Rohr from VRPA Technologies. I'm a transportation engineer and also chair a task force of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. We've been working on SB 743, which is the transition from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. And many of you know, just want to give you an update on some of our recent projects. Many of you know that we provided regional guidelines at the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and those have been available for a couple of years. We have some more recent projects or products that we've developed. We have 3 papers. One of them talks about the role of the Institute of Transportation Engineers as compared to SANTEC and lead agencies in implementing SB 743. The second one talks about the different SANTEC models, and there are some complications with the models. If you want to analyze a land development project and make land use changes to do a BMT analysis, there are some complications given the way that the current models are set up at SANTEC. So we have a paper that talks about how you can do that. And then the third paper has to do with projects that may have trips outside the county, because those are not tracked in the model, but they are supposed to be tracked according to the SB 743 guidance provided by the state. So the third paper talks about whether you might need to make an adjustment for trips outside the county, and then if you feel like you might, how that adjustment might be made. So those 3 papers are available at our website, San Diego ITE. You can do a search, you can find it. You can also get the papers from me, and I don't think I will be taking questions at this meeting, but if you have any questions, Alex knows where to find me, and you can look me up through Alex, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide any information. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I understand Alex may have some updates as well, right?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had 3 updates. The first one is want to make sure that we're going to be getting a 2021 regional plan update, more detail. So want to notify members that to save the date, this is going to be on June 10th at 1 p.m. We're finalizing the agenda and including the discussion topics. So it's going to be a workshop with all working groups. So just save the date for now and look forward to an agenda. And it's going to be, again, virtual at this point because we're still under COVID conditions. And if you've not been aware, we've been making some regional plan presentations to the board. So those are available on the web, and we're getting a little bit more into the details of the proposed projects to the board, but we're planning on doing the same thing to the working groups. The other update that I have is if you have not signed up for our ITS architecture workshop this afternoon, please do so. It's a great opportunity. Part of the regional plan, we have to update our architecture. So we've been about completing the architecture, and we're going to be rolling it out. And today is a workshop. We're just going to highlight the elements of the architecture, the tool that's going to be available via the web. And we're going to go through some exercise, some breakout sessions just to get you familiar with that. But we also plan on doing some more detailed training on the architecture later on. But we wanted to have this first workshop just to walk you through what the elements are. And finally, the third announcement is this is in relation to, bear with me. So because we, SANDAG is recipients of federal funds, and we are required to update our Title VI Civil Rights Act program every 3 years. We have to submit by this summer the racial breakdown of our membership of all our working groups. And so you'll be seeing an email from Tim for all members just to kind of provide us. All it is just a checkbox in terms of how you identify yourself. So look forward to that. And if you could reply to Tim, that'd be great. Thank you. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. We're up on item number 4. It's a agenda item for SANTEC, SANTEC working group update. I'm going to do a very, very quick introduction and turn it over to Alex to give us a little bit more background and give us more specific directions. Just as a background, some of you have embraced this combination of the meetings. There are definitely some challenges. Today is a good example of those challenges. But from my point of view, there are a lot of benefits to these combined and joint meetings as well. The idea is to open up at a very high level to all member agencies and get some feedback from the group, so we can have a little bit more in-depth conversation and discussion in upcoming meetings. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Maybe he can give us a little bit more structure and specific information as to what the expectations are. Alex, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I believe Tim has brought up the slide deck. So you could just go to the next slide, Tim. So you could click the next click because I think this one's animated. So as Chair Mo indicated, we've been working on this. You've been presented with some a couple of items going back to in the fall. And really the focus here is, how do we re-engage or provide greater value into these working groups? So what you're seeing here is just kind of a timeline of things that we've been working in the past, and you've been presented with some updates. But the last time we presented, we were kind of still gathering a lot of the information. Tim also went ahead and collected some additional information from other working groups. But then that allowed us to kind of come up with a little bit more structure, and that's what you're going to be hearing about today. The idea here is, like Chair indicated, I just want to roll this out to get some initial thoughts. What the idea here is, as we move forward, we would work to kind of future meetings, try to develop kind of a work plan to develop an implementation plan. But also, we're also seeking at the same time, based on these things that we've come up, that we've come up, we're going to be presented to our management and our leadership to determine how do we proceed forward, or sort of a recommendation over the next early fiscal year 2022. Next slide, please. So Chair Mo kind of highlighted some of these. Obviously, I'm not going to go through this, but the overall theme here is that, as you know, SANTEC has been established for several years now, going back to early 90s, late 80s. So that's been in place. CTAC, it's also been in place for some time, but I would say the spirit of the discussion items that happened were really mainly focused on, at that time, kind of setting up and structuring guidance and recommendations associated with the Transnet program. So there's specific elements that, both of these committees have provided over the years. But since recently, because essentially I would say the Transnet program is a bit mature, although there's still discussions that are about to happen. One of them that I could think is that the 70-30 discussion on transit guidance. That's still going to happen, but it's limited nonetheless, including, for example, on the SANTEC side is the RAMs. But the overall really theme here is that because there's been sort of changes or shifts in things that we're doing, both at the agency-wide and even at your local agencies, the focus has been on kind of informational items. So that's been limited in terms of the the amount of information that we provide. Sometimes those information items are also redundant, both at SANTEC and SANTEC. Like today, pre-COVID, I understand that we were having issues with SANTEC on quorums. I know that this remote has allowed us to provide greater quorum, but at the same time, it's still an issue, and we want to make sure that we mitigate for that. And then what we heard from the folks that started working, some SANTEC and SANTEC members, the task force, is that the value that we would provide, it's informational, but from your perspective, the forum for technical knowledge or transfer was limited. And that mainly is because at the same time, we're trying to make sure that, both SANTEC and SANTEC recognizing that, these are established SANDAG committees, so therefore we could only bring up SANTEC, SANDAG related elements for discussion. And that limited the information sharing, even to the point where we had some great projects, or folks would reach out to us and say, hey, we have this new concept that we want to roll out to SANTEC and SANTEC. And we were bound by the Brown Act, and just because we were a SANDAG structure committee, that unless we have a direct relationship to working with the local agency, then we might be able to bring them up for discussion. So those were some of the challenges here. There's limited focus. Our roles have changed over time. So we want to make sure that, as we proceed forward, there's some relevance, but again, provide value in two-way for SANDAG and the members. Next slide, please. So I kind of talked about really kind of the focus area. So, the focus will still remain on that side, but the opportunity here is that there's emerging focus areas, and these are just highlighting, and these are some of the ones that we expressed before. Recognizing that there's going to be great value in all of you helping us derive and really kind of develop and structure all these these focus areas that you see here. So there's an opportunity to continue to have the engagement, but the idea here is that we're just restructuring how we have that engagement. And again, there could even be some focus areas from your perspective, from your local agencies, but we're only highlighting the ones here, kind of a regional perspective. And the reason I'm bringing these focus areas is because not that we would, reduce the engagement from local agencies, but it's how do we engage you within those challenge areas? Again, how do we provide that flexibility to continue to have that engagement? Next slide, please. So sort of the themes that based on our initial assessment, internal, again, hearing not only from all of you during our first discovery, but also from other working groups, is that in order to increase relevance, I think that's a great theme or composition that we kind of focus and how we restructure. The idea here is that, we would continue to, and working with all of you, provide guidance, but also share from your experiences from a local perspective, but doing it across disciplines and aligning them, but with the regional and local focused areas. The other key point that we want to emphasize under this increased relevance of value is that, the idea here, because the focus areas are really kind of expanding behind our single disciplines that we've done in the past, public works directors, traffic engineers, to also consider active. And we kind of had a little taste of that at our last joint meeting where we had the active transportation, but also expand to other mobility teams. I know, like, for example, City San Diego, they're engaging and they're advancing, and they have a mobility team on board where it focuses not only on the traditional transportation elements, but the relationship between MoHubs, CUR management. So that's another component. And the idea there is, as we proceed forward, start thinking holistically about all these focus areas, but still providing that spotlight on needed focus areas as they come about. And then that also provides a flexibility on our side. How do we, put a venue together that we really kind of leverage and have that technical transfer, exchange of ideas, not only among the members, but other disciplines, but also maybe start having, like something that we heard from all of you is bringing those those technologies or special interests that you guys are interested. So that provides the flexibility. And one way here is, so what it gets down to is that it kind of start working on restructuring the composition of these working groups, more of a task force structure. And that it really provides the flexibility, and by having that task force restructure, then we could bring, and from what I understand and the guidance that we got from our legal counsel, is that allows us to be more flexible. So we won't be bound, because we're now focusing on specific areas of discussion. So we're not bound by the Brown Act. The other composition theme is the opportunity for streamlining. Again, the whole effort is how do you bring reduce redundancy, but also increase engagement. So for example, if we come up with a task force structure that looks at the relationship and possible guidance on mobility hubs and curb management, smart intersections, then that'll increase participation. And then you're allowed to say, hey, maybe I'll be interested to participating, but maybe my other agency member from the other department should also be involved in that. So that's really kind of the idea there, is taking a look at via lens of subject matter focus areas and interest. So that what really means is kind of revisit the meeting frequencies. Do we have meetings on a monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly, or as needed, depending on the sort of that structure, depending on the subject area of discussion. So these are the themes that kind of elevated to the top. And this is what we are kind of moving forward. The idea here is obviously these are just some initial themes that we would like to consider. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I want to hear your initial thoughts. Again, as Chair Moa indicated, we would continue the discussions, but our thought is that with your help, through the continued discussions, we would implement this task force, again, based on leadership approval to implement these task forces. The look and feel, the structure, that's still, that's something that we would need to work, but essentially these are really kind of the proposed approach at this point. With that, I'll open up for any questions or thoughts.
Thank you, Alex. Just to simulate the conversation, I appreciate the background and information. For the purpose of a group, and I'm talking about both working groups, because of the timing, it is important to hear some initial thoughts from member agencies. And as you express your thoughts, concerns, questions, or comments, at least from my point of view, I think we are going to gather information as much as you can share with us today, and then bring the subject back one more time. It is a major change to what we do and what we've been doing for a long time. I think it deserves a little bit more attention. So don't want to make a recommendation or a decision in a very short time frame. I think it deserves more thoughts and more methodic involvement of all working groups. So with that, I am interested, or at least both Minji and I are interested to hear from member agencies. The other alternative for all of us is that some of us are not here today. I'm more concerned about our SANTEC members. Obviously, it is on the agenda, and they probably get a chance to review the agenda items. We are offering feedback directly to Alex and or Tim in writing via email or even telephone calls, in which case I'm sure Alex and Tim will formulate it and bring it back to the group. Alex, is that an acceptable option?
It is, and really the idea here is introduce this and recognizing the limited time that we have. Yes, that could be a first step, and share any comments to Tim and I, and then as we structure the next meeting, we'll have an agenda item to this effect and what we heard from all of you.
Perfect.
Okay.
I think this is probably good enough at this point, Alex. We may like you suggest that if you get any feedback from the group, we will bring it back. If not, we will definitely have a agenda item in a future meeting to discuss it a little bit more in depth.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minji.
Yeah, I just want to add, I agree with Mo that this definitely deserves a item. I think probably anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes discussion. So we definitely won't have time to do that today. So we'll definitely bring that back in a future meeting. So that brings us to item number 5, the development of the regional decimal plan update by Alex.
And this is going to be another brief presentation. If you just go to the next slide. So this is an item that was brought several times. I think we had an early presentation in the fall, but then we had another follow-up discussion earlier this year. And really the context here is to develop a roadmap for governance and institutional actions, really to help facilitate increased cross-coordination. The concept here is to promote and achieve support for integrated management, or I would say, how do we best work together? And I think the concept here is when we think about transportation TISMO components, we usually think about ITS infrastructure, controllers, detection, and why that is still relevant at our own local agencies. The concept here is that, sometimes we're just focused on the planning, development, and implementation, and we walk away. And something that we've learned over the past years is that the implementation of those assets go beyond just the development, and we need to start considering how we best improve those relationships so we could actually continue to use those elements more efficiently. How can we work together to determine how to best use those assets? Really, the focus here is benefiting the motoring public. Because remember, if you're a commuter or user of the network system, there's specific benefits that we're trying to achieve, but from a commuter perspective, they really are regardless of what facilities they use or what systems that they use. So really focus on customer. And the reason behind kind of this work that we undertook is there's been a couple I would say culture changes that have happened over the last years. There's an increased focus on the feds or the state on how do we work together to maximize our existing assets. There's also been an increase in advancing, how do we achieve a connected environment? But at the same time, what that means for us, for example, simple example, we have smart intersection components. So there's a lot of technology out there that has advanced over the last years, and that's given us the opportunity to really kind of think about how do we maximize our assets from its systems. And then this requires, as I mentioned briefly, culture change. There's a shift where traditionally, again, we would focus on identifying the ITS assets or technology, we would develop and build it. And then, for our own purposes, we would walk away. But the shift that's happening is how do we make sure that we continue to operate those systems holistically, again, for the focus across boundaries, across modes, but the focus on the customer. So the plan that we put together it focuses on 3 themes or action items that you'll see that I'm going to be talking briefly. Is how do we bound a proposed action plan or roadmap based on institutional people, some establishing common goals, so that governance, operational, there's common operational sort of engagement of process that we all undertake, but how we do that, how do we start thinking about that philosophy from a business process. And then the tools, recognizing that because there's, we're thinking about multi-agency, multimodal. Sometimes the tools that are available at this point to kind of shift this TISMO focus, they're not there. So there's a couple of action items that we recommended in the TISMO plan. Next slide, please. So here's just a snapshot, just to kind of touch on sort of what I just talked about. The traditional way of thinking is you can see here from a goals to the strategies, the business process to the TISMO approach. And really the idea here is that, is thinking beyond our bounds. And that this is happening. And again, there's increased focus from the feds and also the state and obviously now the regional plan, where the focus here is future funding. How do we think about our assets from not only what we want to do on our own jurisdiction, but how do we want to do it across when working together as across agencies? Next slide, please. I just wanted to highlight here, this is a slide deck that we're going to be using, and you'll be seeing this in our ITS architecture workshop if you can be. And the reason I just want to highlight here is that it kind of provides that profile from a planning perspective and project delivery. And I would just pay attention to the TISMO line at the bottom. The idea here is that, again, in the past, we would do a great job in planning and design our ITS assets. And, either they would be at the high level, and then at the local agency, regional level, you proceed with more strategic planning, corridor projects, or your own studies. Then we, turn that into design and implement and test. But what TISMO brings to the table is it's really kind of having those institutional commitment, working across the agencies, not only from the planning, but all the way and beyond just the implement testing. That line that you see here is actually would go beyond through the operations. Because again, we turn our attention to implementing ITS assets or strategies or projects, but then we walk away. But the idea here is to really maximize those assets. There has to be some level of coordination across the agencies. Otherwise, at some point, there's going to be limited benefits with what we're doing. And I know this is a culture shift, but that's really, like I mentioned, this is something that's happening both at the state and federal level. Next slide, please. So this is what the TISMO plan includes. We include kind of a walkthrough of the business case, why we need to do it, what our TISMO needs, and then we also provide our guiding principles along with the goal, and then the action plan, and there's a toolkit. The other reason, obviously, why we want to do it is because this is going to be a part of the regional plan. So part of what you're going to be hearing in our regional plan presentation, there's a number of action items that are going to be part of the regional plan. So as we proceed with ITS projects or the 5 big moves, there's these elements that we need to kind of work through over the next years, and that's the other reason why we did the TISMO plan. Next slide, please. Sort of the business case, we all know, we're familiar with sort of the ITS type of projects, and we recognize we've been in this field for some time. And one of the challenges that we have is that because these projects generally take less capital infrastructure expenses, or we work toward kind of implementing solutions that deal more in technology. We know, for example, that the benefit costs associated with these projects are relatively better than the traditional capital intensive projects. And this is a message that we also included in the TISMO plan. But the thing to recognize here is that the values and the benefits that come with those projects are sometimes the same or even greater than traditional capital improvement projects. We know, for example, there's improved reliability when we start thinking about our signal system improvements or new technologies, advanced detection, and there's faster implementation when we think about that. The other component in the regional plan is that we know that this is out there, but generally sometimes this message doesn't come through in our plans. But most importantly, in order to really make the case that these are some elements, I think we have the understanding that these type of projects happen fairly fast and the benefits are great, but how do we think about it from a holistic approach? How do we come together to make the case that in order to maintain the focus on these type of benefits, it requires cross multi-agency coordination. Next slide, please. And then here's a slide deck from our 5 big moves. And if you could just click to the next one. So if you leave it there, go back real quick. I mean, the concept here is that we have an existing network, right? We have our MoHubs that are implementing. We have a local streets and road program network. So there's going to be a lot of ITS improvements. It's going to be predicated on technology. On top of that, what you see this green light is our proposed managed lanes strategy concept. So there's going to be pricing associated with that. There's going to be providing mobility choices. And then on top of that, then we're going to have setting that infrastructure for our proposed rapid transit system. And then on top of that, we're going to have our more improvements to our existing trolley lines. And then on top of that, we're going to have the commuter rail in the later years of the regional plan. But the reason I want to highlight this is because even though within these individual components of the 5 big moves, again, it's going to be predicated on technology. And if you're a traveler coming from the North County side, and if you wish to take the managed lanes, or if you wish to take that under the layer beneath, which is local streets and programs, the smart intersections, the idea here is that they don't care who owns and operate those systems, right? And we're in charge of making sure as we develop these systems, working with all of you, that we understand come together and coming up with a common operational philosophy where we improve and consider input from all of you. So in fact, if we have a regional arterial management system that includes smart intersections, the idea is that we have to talk to each other and understand and come up, excuse me, with a common operational philosophy. And that's the same case for not only the sort of the vertical, but the horizontal alignment against all of these proposed moves that we're presenting. And that's so TISMO is going to be key to the implementation of the regional plan. Next slide. And I'm just going to go through this real briefly. So we included vision, we include the 3 guiding principles, and along with each principle, we have a goal associated with each principle. I'm not going to go through this, but for example, principle 2 talks about the business process. How do we make sure that we embed the TISMO philosophy in our existing planning process or project development process? Next slide, please. So the TISMO plan actions, again, focuses on these 3 buckets I explained before, which is kind of the governance. Okay, what do we need to do from a governor's perspective so we can start thinking about this holistically? And then we also have an operational process and actions. Okay, if we do have a governance, we have the commitment from our leadership, from ourselves in terms of who's going to be involved. What are those operational process actions that we need to consider? Next slide. And then the last sort of technical actions is, and maybe I'll just refer to the graphic here, is we all know that when we do signal timing, there's a difference between signal timing, for example, or coordination with ramp meters, that the tools that you use from a regional perspective are quite different because they're not sensitive enough, because that's the field that we deal with, is understanding if we do and implement a new signal timing, it requires a different tool. So what we're trying to do with this action plan is that make sure that if we proceed forward, and when we proceed forward, that we start taking a look at those tools that we need to have available, so it could help us derive. One high level is, for example, is coming up with the tools to demonstrate the benefits across modes, the benefits across agencies. And that's something that we just don't have right now because everything's kind of more the regional, or it's more project specific. Next slide. So that's really the intent. The idea here is that we develop the TISMO plan. Again, it's going to be part of a regional plan, but we do have a couple of one-pagers in the plan as well that speaks to sort of the actions, and those will be shared and also be part of the plan. Any questions? I know I had to go through this real briefly, but any thoughts? I know we have 5 minutes. Again, this is for informational service purposes.
Thank you, Alex. I do not hear any questions, and in the interest of staying on time, let's move on to Caltrans update. Is Rob going to do the update? Who's going to do the update for Caltrans?
There, I hope you can hear me now. I put the updates on the screen again. This is Rob Owen with the Division of Planning and Local Assistance. And I know this is in your agenda package, but I'll just jump to a couple of the highlights. As always, the inactive projects list is growing, and FHWA is now requiring a spreadsheet to be submitted with justifications. So that's included in there, but that's a new requirement. So if you have any questions about that, that's going to be due here actually today, May 20th, for any projects that are on the inactive list from your agencies. FHWA needs to have that justification. And or if you are working on submitting an active project invoice, let us know. Contact information for Alma Sanchez is in our notes here. I know the next item says for authorizations, January 29th. I mean, we always give a very early deadline every year for those authorizations. Really the final cutoff is going to be July 29th this year, where you could really, can't really get anything in past that time, but we need enough time to be able to review and process those authorizations with FHWA. So keep working on those and give us the status of how those are coming along for the year. Also, another deadline coming up is the June 1st deadline for exhibits 9B and 9C regarding disadvantaged business enterprise. And that's just an annual requirement. So if you're doing federal projects before, they're pretty similar to what you've done in the past. So again, just a timely reminder on that. I'll just skip ahead. I think that was the main thing. Just again, allocation requests. Again, that's something always to try to get. Well, it's due a couple of months early, but always try to at least be talking with us before that deadline of when you want it allocated. They've pretty much have finished any extensions they had been doing for the pandemic, as far as any timely use of funds or contracting deadlines. Those have pretty much expired here with the June 30th of this year. So now we're back to the regular CTC deadlines. And just another quick reminder on the quality assurance plans. There are agencies that are coming due or expired or highlighted there. And this mentoring program that FHWA just started, might be interest to any of you, either to be mentors or it's just a kind of another way to help people out. It seems like an interesting program that FHWA is offering. So that's I just attached the flyer on the last few pages there, and we'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robin, for the update. So upcoming meetings. The next meeting is tentatively scheduled for June 24th. Will be a joint CTAC, SANTEC, and also the active transportation working group meeting. If you have any items of interest, please send it to either Alex, Tim, or the chairs. Okay, that's it for that.
Great, thank you, Minji. Thank you, Alex. And despite the fact that we started a little bit late, we're still on time. I want to thank everyone for participating and encourage to do so for our June meeting. If there's no other comments or questions, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.